Of Kittens and Broken Things. Chapter 66. Kara stood at Vigil's console, verifying that the information requested was on her Ummei tool. She had impossible answers that matched the impossible screams and urgings in her head. The screams and urgings did not end, but did shift in priority to degrees calmer, closer to background, some part of her assuring the replaying images that had not stopped that she had paid attention. She believed them. She was a witness. She saw. She would do as they asked, as they knew. Each one of them was as real and as immediate as Garrus, as herself, as her parents. The word insanity was newly defined in several ways in relation to herself, to the galaxy she'd been born into, to what she needed to do, and who had told her to do it. She had to redefine the concept of exhausted, to dig deeper, find more, while realizing the practical limits of the human body she occupied. She had to contain the sense of insanity and not allow it to become contagious. More contagious. She did not close her eyes, afraid she would not be able to open them again. Closing her eyes would result in easing the stinging, but that momentary comfort would trigger a longing for more. She'd crave dark and quiet. She'd lose her balance, and her resolve might weaken. She might fall, metaphorically and literally. The people standing behind her in posture of solidarity in support of her unique genius, and in opposition of her perceived insanity and potential physical failure, were blurred in significance from those she loved into those she had to save. Then it blurred again to the reality that they were the people she had to use to save everyone else, potentially all future cycles. If she could. She needed them, not for comfort, not for support, but for their minds, for their capacity to formulate, for their resolve. She could not tell them, not about the insane God. Vigil was right. Being told by an isolated and failed AI who couldn't pay the power bill and had watched the pods of their people open and turn to dust, that she must oppose an isolated and impossibly powerful, insane AI while she was isolated and driven situationally insane. Put that in a short paragraph. See how it sounds. There's an insane and genocidal God who was challenged by scholars cycle after cycle over time to answer the question, can a rock be so big that God cannot move it? And the God, not wanting to look ignorant before worshippers, believing itself to be benevolent and wise, replied that only God could conceive of such a rock, and that rock would be perfect, because it was conceived by God. Based on that being the only intelligible answer from the thing, here's a snowball. The holy rock, to be lobbed at that God in effigy, an offering at its altar, given with effort, blood, and humility. It doesn't matter what it's made of, really, as long as that God is pleased that the offering conforms to the given definitions of perfection. Hopefully, then, that insane God abides by its own cagey rules that it didn't want discovered, but that's what happens when you're insane. You do and say dumb things. So, let's go. Was she insane? Yes. And no. Sanity was found in the choice to not close her eyes when she had to see if she was the only one that could see. Sanity was in not closing her ears when she had to hear if she was the only one that could hear. Sanity would be in, as always, countering insanity and destruction with whatever appropriate action, which looked insane, was required. Sanity was not doing harm to the people who had declared unified mutiny on the way in. That was past. Insignificant. They would follow her orders because they had to, and she had to give them. No time for disciplined boundaries. If they couldn't get it done with who they were at this moment, they could not get it done. Discipline was to ensure future behavior modification, and at the moment, she did not conceive much of a future for herself, so attention to behavior modification vis-a-vis her command was wasted time and energy, the two main things she could not afford to waste. It had been 2 days since she'd interacted with the crew, other than puncturing sonar, and since then the rise and fall of an empire of extraordinarily gifted Protheans had streamed through her mind, sweeping much of her humanity to the side as she immersed herself in their memories, their thoughts, their language, their stories, dreams, and deaths. She took a moment again to reassure the Protheans that they were as real as her crew to her, that she was at the beginning, and she knew they had witnessed the beginning to the end, that there was hope. They had provided for her to create a new beginning. She honored their sacrifices, their ingenuity, their insight. They would all contribute to saving a cycle that was not theirs against an enemy that was. She stood on the shoulders of Prothean giants, seeing through their 4 eyes, feeling through their skin with humility and respect. The memories of the Protheans were now like her parents, her guides. The people with her physically were her team, her Panifa pieces, her path to the next step. She couldn't see them as individual people right now. The hammering of internal suffering for the last excruciating eternity of her few days. Had it only been a few days? Her logic still held. Nobody could touch her. Nobody could get in her head. She had to blink because blinking was normal. She had to sleep because sleeping was normal. Fortunately, normal, in terms of Shepard, had a lot of leeway, and her team did love and understand her, including knowing that if they did not understand her, they had faith. Her command, or the end of her command, the end of the Reapers, the end of the hated thing on the Citadel, would all involve acts of invoked faith, conviction, and execution. She could not do it without that love, understanding, and above all, obedience. She had to convince a God that she was worthy. She had to hope she had already convinced her team, her allies, and at least in terms of those that stood shoulder to shoulder in support and opposition of her, not stopping her mission but carrying it forward when she was potentially too weak to do it or survive it. She believed she had. They were convinced as long as she got some sleep and didn't try to go it entirely alone. She would do that for them, and for her, and for the voices in her head, and because she needed her balance, her humility, and not this corrosive anger and rebellion when she approached the profane God that stood for everything she had newly learned to hate. She could not disclose what she was doing, or why. She did not have to pretend to be Shepard. She was Shepard. Every breath, every move, every word, every moment had to be orchestrated and must dovetail into reasserting her sanity when she was, by most definitions at the moment, insane. Hearing voices, carrying forward religious delusions, legitimizing hearsay of the ages, and risking trillions of lives on the chance that Vigil was right and the plans had potential of succeeding. Bowing down to desperation, hoping that the Geth had not found a way to reprogram it, hoping they had done what they had done in partial ignorance, partial dark, having faith in the mechanics only, taking the option of creating a duplicate citadel in hopes of generating something, testing something. They had practiced sympathetic magic. Given time, they would discover the missing component of their spell. She remembered the makeshift altar space of the Geth in Pharos and thought of Sooth, the creation of the minds of her people, and knew their faith to be capable of the value of one, where one was the value of infinite. How long had the myth of reapers persisted among the Geth? Years? Was this where they were headed, even back then? Was it a deliberate part of the code that subverted them? And the worst part, that they were right, that the answer was in faith, God, and not in a physical construct? To generate unnumbered, infinite values of one, to please a God that could see itself in their image, faith and devotion guaranteed. She had to hope that their construction was sound, that it was as Geth were prone to behave, unerringly binary, and not a hybrid. Geth would follow the construction details without deviation. If they were in the preliminary stages of secretive testing, it would be the value of one by default. Once the faux citadel was entirely constructed, once the sympathetic magic spell had been officially cast and failed, they would explore other meanings, other values. They would find it as she had. Saren had used the beacon and survived. Saren had Geth allies. She had to hope that the AI of the Citadel remaining hidden did mean that it was in fact threatened, that it knew the plans were possible, and that it had no choice but to abide by those plans if executed according to its law. This wasn't a 0.1% hope, this was layers of 0.1 multiplied until the odds of success, when reviewed, became meaningless, and the cost infinite to her personally and to others, in that binary sense that dead is dead, whether the Geth did it, she did it by taking a wrong step, or reapers finally make their blind and mindless appearance. She had no other options other than abdication, despair, retreat, acceptance of everyone being slaughtered, one by one, to reaper forces at the altar of the god she feared facing rather than be responsible for getting them all killed in her folly. If I have been appointed goddess of folly, I had better live up to it. How do I appear to worship a god that I hate and seek to destroy with the power of cycles of hatred behind me? Can it read minds? Can it read my mind? Another layer of improbable multiplied itself into the formula and extended the string of zeros and the quickly receding odds. She reflected on what she had said to Sennar, that maybe she'd be doing him a favor by severing his spine. That was distilled wisdom from Protheans dying horrifically and becoming indoctrinated, turned loose to hunt down their former families and colleagues. Do what you're afraid to do. Close your eyes and keep your balance. If you can't do that, you have no hope of doing anything more complicated. She breathed. She blinked. She did not sway. She did not fall. The stinging subsided. The stinging came back. She endured. She would prove Russ wrong, prove mutiny was unnecessary, and insignificant, walk out of here on her own power, formulate the next step with every resource she had. She would not apologize for her behavior. They would not apologize for theirs. They had no time for it. Vigil had given her specifications for the crucible, notated in Prothean script. She looked at them and blinked deliberately once again as an act of defiance, an act of will, and then asked Vigil, "Please, I need strategic options. I need a copy of these specifications separated out into technical construction and explanation of function. I will keep this version. Please send another with the technical and theoretical specifications separated out into two distinct sections. Anything regarding the AI to be kept in Prothean script, anything regarding technical or physical build in English. I need schematics of the physical and technical spaces for others to review. I need to keep the final destination and confrontation concealed, but disseminate as much about the crucible to others so I have tactical help without overwhelming what might be a military strike with what seems like insanity. I need the specifications of the church without any reference to what God is worshipped there. You understand. Please keep my Omnitool frequency. Access my vital signs through this program. If they stop for 10 minutes, access my camera and microphone. Determine if it is Omnitool damage or loss of life signs. If I am dead, I need you to contact each of the Omnitool frequencies of my colleagues here and tell them the full story. Tell Edie, the Normandy's AI. If I can't accomplish this goal, I can continue the tradition of sacrifice and aid future cycles potentially. You okay here for power, in case you have to go for another cycle? I am. If you are victorious, will you inform me? I will. Thank you, Shepard. She got the requested version of those specs, reviewed them briefly, and was satisfied that she could take the next step from there. Now she needed to lift her foot without knowing where she would put it down. Keep momentum, do not stand still physically or emotionally. See the next step. She turned and started to walk, keeping her eyes on her Omnitool, knowing everyone would get out of her way. They did, and then fell in behind her on the way out. I'm sending you all specifications of the object we observed. The Protheans call it the Crucible. I need it. I need it intact, separated from the duplicate Citadel, and then either brought to the real Citadel or the real Citadel brought to it in either of the locations they are in now or mutually to a secondary location, depending on Geth force and potential for pursuit. If you've all been awake as long as I have, you need to get some sleep. I need to get some sleep, and I'll report to the medbay as soon as I am assured we have teams formulating plans and options, coordinated by Edie. I need everyone. I need everything. Every resource available. Collector ships, council resources, homeworld fleets. We have to clear hundreds of thousands of Geth from that site. We need to find the most efficient and fastest way to get that done. It can't be a destructive process. It is not acceptable in any way that the Crucible is damaged during its capture. Its integrity is paramount. Oh, great. An escort mission. She smiled for a lopsided second and nodded, ensuring that nodding also did not cause her to lose her balance. Highest alert possible. We need to find out whatever we can about that location, and we can't afford to wait. These specifications may have been altered, but it's a place to start. It's likely they would construct it as close to specifications as possible. I'm not worried about major deviations from construction. I do want everyone to worry about potential demolition or sabotage once the Geth become fully aware what our intentions are. So it has to be fast, and we have to deny them access while securing ours. She talked and briefed, brought in Edie, and explained on the way back in the shuttle. She was brave enough to sit down without fear, blink without fear. The potential of sleep and oblivion, numb and shaking muscles that dragged her down, was there like the screaming of Protheans. And she endured. She was assured the specifications were disseminated, the correct version translated into multiple languages. She sent everyone off into prep teams, left each person the discretion of getting sleep or not. She did not order it. She did not smile at anybody, share any eye contact, or answer any questions. Fortunately, these people that loved her followed her orders and no longer looked to her to assuage their deep and uneasy curiosity. She wished she had not told Sennar that her explanations would not be reassuring. She could not backpedal on the cost. She could not backpedal on the immediacy. And she was itching with the entropy of everything seemingly tumbling downhill, with her trying to keep it from shaking apart and spinning into crushing force that would take her and everyone else with it. She needed the genie in the bottle, but there was the smell of magical smoke in the air she could not recall. She stood behind the action of cutting into Sennar's throat for his attempted manipulation of seeking information under the guise of assistance when it had been, as always, his insatiable curiosity and need to control as his primary motivations. He had wished to be exceptional. He was, but not at that moment, and now everyone had had a bad day. He'd richly deserved it, and he knew it. She was certain he did not hold a grudge, but she had shown her hand in order to save crucial time, and the man was far too intelligent. She needed him more than ever to help formulate and execute any method of taking the crucible intact with minimal loss of life. She had to think about Sooth and the potential cost to Geth after she woke, because that was... I can't do that now. I can't. I have to stop now. Blinking deliberately was beginning to feel like she was shearing off a thin layer of her corneas each time, and she would not take another stim because she needed to sleep. She had to get to the med bay on her own power, could not tremble, could not fall. She handed off bits of blind responsibility in chunks, like tearing off her skin and giving it in bleeding patches to others, because she could not afford to keep it to herself. She ordered that the Normandy be brought to the nearest relay and held there pending formulation of plans. Then she reported to the med bay and told Dr. Chakwas, "I believe I can sleep now. Please keep me under observation. If I need anything to make sure I stay under, feel free." Fortunately, my beacon treasure hunt was fruitful. The Prothean voices have faded. It was true and not true. Not true enough, but she couldn't say, "Do not let Liara in my head," because that was more magical smoke she could not let escape. She had to establish her own sanity with each breath. "Yes, Commander. Good luck." She was going to need all the luck. She made it to the bed. She kept the tremble out of her voice and limbs, the screams out of everyone else's awareness, and she could finally close her eyes, wondering idly if this was the last time she was going to be able to sleep. If Prothean voices would allow her to wake. If the Geth would find and flip a switch that worked. If Liara would need to rescue her and would see. She could not risk that, and could not prevent that. Had to lie down and have faith the goddess of folly would wake to fulfill her unlikely destiny. She would not be sharing a bed or stolen moments with Garrus. No venom, no reverie, no asari, no talking. Loose lips, sink ships, and galaxies.
Garrus reconvened at definitely not a mutiny of Dr. Chakwas, Russ, Liara himself, and Sonar, now including Edie. Kara was unavailable in so many ways, and this wasn't strictly against any orders. He was in command while she was out. Garrus asked Dr. Chakwas, "How is she?"
Sleeping. Sleeping naturally. Still elevated levels of stress hormones and adrenal components, but as expected, unable to manufacture more. The rations given to her were lacking in building blocks required to create more with some suppressants. There is a drop-off of those components, but I cannot advocate continuing that approach. Her Omni tool shows she used discrete boosts of stims used in appropriate dosage for soldiers who are required to remain alert. She requires all building blocks for optimal function cognitively. She must have them in her next meal and are part of what I'm supplementing in her sleep. Her mental function on Ilos? Good enough so that she spoke to the AI in what had to be Prothean. We didn't hear much except for occasional translatable swearing.
Garrus said, anxious about saying it and anxious about not saying it. She smells wrong.
Wrong how?
New wrong. Something that hasn't happened before. Can't tell. Not good.
We all gathered this is not good. A concern I hold comes from a statement you made, Liara, about her experiencing what it would be like to be indoctrinated. Is it possible she is, I imagine the word would be possessed, by a particular indoctrinated Prothean presence?
Russ made a facial expression of, "oh fuck," and his head tilted back, fringe scraping the wall.
Oh, I, I, I don't know. You could likely not detect that any more than Garrus could detect what is specifically wrong about her scent. No prior context for comparison.
She wanted to go alone. She spoke in Prothean.
But she spoke to an AI that had previously helped us defeat Saren and his Geth, helped us oppose Reapers. Why would she go there if she were... To discover what that AI knew. Potentially end its influence on future cycles. Potentially end whatever it is the Geth are building. Eliminate it. Eliminate all evidence of its existence.
Russ said in frustration, intended to cut through the what-if bullshit that Garrus knew he could not stand.
What does that fucking thing do? And why won't she tell us? Garrus, did she speak Prothean to Vigil the first time?
No, we understood everything.
There are several things to take into account. Moments where she most likely told the truth in order to accommodate her plans. Liara, from what you saw, can you say with certainty that she is or is not influenced by indoctrinated Prothean memory? I would say no. She was herself, overwhelmed by significance and unable to tell the relative passing of time, but herself. I understand that thought can be contagious and it's a terrifying possibility, but from her internal behavior, no. She told me that explanation would not be reassuring, and that she had no time for it. She told Garrus that to comprehend would require centuries of perception and master classes regarding subjects that were not available. If Protheans could give her this information through beacon and touch, perhaps those moments were blunt truth revealed under stress. Not to mislead us, but to explain why she could not, would not, lead us in certain directions. An expression of her true dilemma. She will not tell us because she cannot tell us. We must consider this as potential truth. Dr. Chakwas, you could not explain what you have learned of medicine to anybody else in a brief time. If I asked you to explain it to me sufficiently in a few moments, or even a few days, so I would comprehend all the complexities and perform it in your stead, it would not be possible. Garrus and Hemorus, you could not explain the intricacies of Turian culture to someone of another culture, so someone of another culture could pass as Turian on information alone. Liara, you could not explain to another how to join minds. I can state that I have infallible memory, but I cannot grant it to another by disclosing that information. Which is it, Tualon? She's fine, or she isn't? She is both. Whatever she faces is potentially something she cannot transfer to us in comprehension or execution. Given her time restraints, she will not try. Attempting to explain would interrupt and take time from what she is planning to do. It is the same as taking her orders in the heat of battle, only the time frame is extended. The gaps in the truth are potentially expressions of her unwillingness to lie to us, not proof of manufactured lie. She has no energy to direct toward convincing us. She must rely upon our being convinced. She has given us what parts of the puzzle she can give to us. She came here to the medbay to be watched, knowing we would be watching her, that we are united in watching her. She has to be both fine and not fine. She did not remove us from participation based on our mutiny. She forgave us our trespasses because what seems to be the most valuable resource, one she will not squander, is time. Why didn't she kill me? Perhaps she believes the odds are high that we will all die soon. Killing you would be redundant and a waste of her precious time. I fucking hate this job so much. So what do we do? Follow her orders. Solve the pieces of the puzzle that she has given us, which pose a considerable challenge in themselves. Keep her alive at all costs.
I can speak some Prothean. Did anybody record her conversation with Vigil?
I am a recording of her conversation with Vigil, and I did also record it. Is Shepard aware that you speak Prothean?
No, but she might infer it. Considering the stress she is under, perhaps she forgot that the collector language is derived from Prothean, and I translated it for her. Intrigued, I proceeded to attempt to translate all Prothean artifacts on record.
Oh, well, I'm obsolete.
You are still the Shadow Broker.
Right. So only the first 100 years of my life were a waste, not the last 3. Good to know. Sonar played the recording of the conversation between Vigil and Shepard. Edie translated it incompletely, but clearly enough to understand. They sat in stunned silence for chilled moments.
Russ raised a hand.
Anybody want to go back to just a few minutes ago? That relatively warm and happy feeling that maybe she was just indoctrinated? Edie, can you translate everything on those plans?
No, insufficient sampling of artifacts available for all context.
Okay. I'm going to Thessia. I need to get access to unrecorded artifacts and get as much military support for Shepard as I can. I will coordinate with Sooth. I have rapport with her and can help ease the way for whatever path must be taken that intersects with Geth. I will continue to monitor her and resume all indicated dietary and supplemental requirements for being under accelerated stress of this magnitude.
After they had all left and only Russ and Garrus remained, Russ said,
A while back, I decided that following Shepard was a faith-based initiative. That was supposed to be metaphoric.
Garrus gave him a lopsided smile and said, Yeah, come with me. We're about to call in every favor from everyone who owes us, strong-arm everyone else, and get her everything she needs.